Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Very excited to be joined by Amy Lundy. We're going to be breaking down the Australian Open after Yannick Sinner and Madison Keys came out victorious. Amy, how you doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. We were just having a nice discussion about tournaments, and who knows, maybe we'll see each other at a tournament at some point. That'd be great to catch up as well. The women's I wanted to start off with just because I feel like the final was extremely exciting and also the back end of that tournament as well. For the men's, I felt like it was really exciting in week one, and then it maybe died down a little bit, strangely in the latter stages, in the quarters, semis, and final. But Madison Keys played an incredible tournament, of course, winning her maiden Grand Slam and beating the number one and number two seed, on top of also beating Rabakina Svitolina, and as an incredible run. What were your thoughts on her form, I guess, during the tournament, and also were you surprised? Well, how surprised were you?
I was surprised that she pulled it all together. I mean, I guess I was surprised in the moment, but maybe not surprised in the grand scheme of things. It's funny. I was texting with another journalist right in the middle of the tournament, and somehow I made a reference to expectations. I was talking about expectations for Coco Gauff and how they've really increased, and she's under a microscope, and she changes her grip, and people debate it and discuss it online, and even errors that look forced for Coco, they're going to say they're unforced because she's Coco Gauff. She should be able to make that shot. But I said, a player like Madison Keys, there's no expectations. Well, lo and behold, Madison Keys goes on to win the tournament. So um, I think the really interesting thing was that the tennis world had taken expectations off of Keys to win a Grand Slam. But even more importantly, she had taken those expectations off herself. And she was just playing, just very much within the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think she looked extremely happy on court and seems to have changed her mentality. And as you said, expectations around her own tennis. Also, an equipment change as well, racket change. It seemed like she just had a fresh start and came with a really, I think, positive perspective and outlook into the Australian Open and played very freely. I think that was plain to see in her matches as well, which was great to see. Played some extremely entertaining matches, including, of course, a three-set thrillers against Fiontek and Sabalenka in the final. And it seemed like she's just found a good balance of, she's always going to be the type of player who will make unforced errors, but I think she managed to find the right balance of when to really step on the gas and when not to, in the rallies. So that was really impressive. The serve I thought was really potent throughout the whole tournament. What really stood out to you in terms of her game and maybe her mentality in this tournament?
It's interesting. She has been coming on a little bit even prior to the racket change. I remember her playing well during clay season last year at times, and her remark was, "Look at me, I'm good on clay now." So this hasn't been like so dramatic, but in terms of the game itself, yeah, she's serving as well as she always has. However, she's made some technical adjustments to her serve, so that's really working for her. Um, she was platform. She's now moved to pinpoint, which is used by the majority of players, especially women. And the forehand just looks less slappy. If I know that's not like a technical term, but I definitely like slowed down a couple of the replays and went back and watched them several times to look at her racket path, and there seems to be just a little bit more fluidity to her forehand. So I think between the new strings, the new racket, and the new mentality, she was just playing very free. And I thought it was interesting that after the Swiatek match, she asked the person who was interviewing her on court, did she have a match point?" And believe it or not, that does happen. Martina Navratilova has said that when she really gets into a zone, she doesn't pay attention to the score and she's just going point by point. So I think that's what happened here.
Yeah, I agree with your point on her playing a more fluid style of tennis. I think, especially on the forehand side, I felt she just didn't look as jarred maybe on that side. And I think slappy is probably, as you said, not the technical term, but it is very. I think it's in keeping with the change that we've seen. I think it just seems like she's got easy power, and it seems like it's more through the timing and her footwork rather than kind of forcing it sometimes. And she's always been an extremely big hitter. I think we all know that, but I think the errors have always been there and the inconsistency. But she managed to piece it together beautifully in this tournament, so it was great to see. And it's been a number of years since her first Grand Slam final when she lost to Sloane Stephens at the US Open. So to then, at 29 years of age, do it at the Australian Open now. And I think the run, I mean, what did you think of her run, the players she beat? Because it surely has to be one of the best runs for a maiden Grand Slam win ever on the
I
women's
was
side.
really pleased to see her perform well against Danielle Collins because Collins plays well there and a former finalist. And there was a lot of heat surrounding her, and the crowd was vocal. And I looked at that matchup and I thought, well, this is going to be tough for Madison because Danielle is fired up and quality player, and she handled her in straight sets. Just this is something that I haven't really discussed with anyone yet, but why not bring it out here? One thing that's really cool about Madison Keys' technique is it's very grounded. The energy really comes from the ground. So a lot of times when you see both male and female players hitting a ground stroke from the baseline, you will see them actually get air. They're not jumping, but the force of their swing is taking them off the ground, right? It's taking their feet off the ground. You really don't see that with Madison Keys, and you don't see it with Yannick Sinner all that much either. A lot of their ground strokes, their feet don't leave the ground, and that can actually make for a very, very powerful ground stroke.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Amy. And actually, when I think about it, you don't really see Yannick, take his feet off the ground, and with Keys as well. And I wonder whether that extra stability helps with with their ball striking. I'm assuming it does. Just that extra bit of balance, and I guess, as you said, it comes then up through their feet, through their legs, and maybe it's the more efficient way of transferring their weight and like energy through the ball. So that's really interesting, actually, and I'll definitely look out for that in Sinner and Keys' next matches, actually, and see like how different it is to say like a Sabalenka or an Alcaraz as well, who clearly is off the ground a lot.
I
Carlos
mean,
is,
you can hit the ball both ways. A
yeah,
player can hit the ball both ways, and sometimes you do see Yannick just haul off, and the force of his racket head speed is so much that it takes him off the ground, and you see
yeah,
that with Novak too. You see it with almost all of them, but there are some female players who get air basically on almost every ground stroke, and one of
mm,
those I think is Raducanu, or most of her ground strokes. She's just like hauling off and propelling herself off the ground. I think actually, I mean, this is like I don't know a lot about this. There are people that know more about this technical stuff, but I think it's maybe less accurate to do it that way.
yeah.
But also, I mean, just I found that you get a lot of power when your feet are you're able to really step in and your feet stay on the ground. I don't know. It's just something I wanted to bring up.
No, no, I agree. I mean, from my club tennis experience, I'd agree. I think normally when you get off the ground, it's because you haven't been able to sort out your feet quick enough. So you have to adjust the contact point right when you're hitting it. So you end up coming off the ground almost to get that perfect contact point because you don't want to be hitting above your head or in a really awkward position to like kind of whipping it awkwardly. So yeah, I agree. I think it's Yeah, yeah, something to bear in mind. Actually, might have to look into that a bit more because it's an
Yeah,
interesting
look
point.
into it. Like, and again, this is not, and contact point does relate to it. Like if you're trying to hit a different trajectory and you want to get up to the ball at its height, and Raducanu does take the ball very early. So there is something to timing and contact point there. It's just a guy who I did a clinic with who actually is friends with Novak, Gordon Euling. I remember him being very much rock solid and stay grounded. That was his big takeaway. Try not to leave the ground, even though that's what you see on TV. Um, it's not every shot. It's oftentimes the replays. So we kind of got off on a tangent here, but let's just say that for Madison Keys, I was very impressed with her ground strokes.
Yeah, no, she was. Yeah, I mean the fact that she came up against Sabalenka and I think essentially overpowered her for large parts of that final, I think was extremely impressive because we know how hard Sabalenka hits the ball, and even Swiatek. I mean, she. I think for the first time, I think it's for the first time in Australian Open history. I think I've seen the stat that a woman's hit with more RPMs than the men. So she hit with 3,000, I think it was RPMs, which is more than
Wow.
any of the men. So she
Wow.
was really ripping her forehand, Swiatek, and I think that was pretty plain to see as well because she played a lot better at this Australian Open than I think
Hmm.
arguably any other run in her career so far as well. The final then. So I mean, I'm assuming how surprised were you? Keys made the final and she was playing some really good tennis. Were you surprised that she got through that Sabalenka final, especially after she lost the second set, but then played really well, held her nerve and mentality?
I was surprised because so often I have seen this, even on the men's side, you see it all the time, where somebody pulls off that big upset. It's a grueling match that goes the distance, and then they let down. And so I was really surprised to see her high level in that next match. How about you? Were you surprised?
Yeah, well, so I think after the second set, I was thinking, I think Sabalenka is going to take over. And I think I'd predicted when I did a video, and I predicted 3 sets for Sabalenka. So I did think Keys would take a set. I just thought she's playing really well. She'd beaten Collins, Svitolina, Swiatek. I was just a Rebecca. I was thinking surely she's beaten. So it wasn't like she'd had a run where she'd beaten quite a few players outside the top 10, top 20, and then she played one player inside the top 10, like a Swiatek or Rebecca, and beat them. She'd consistently beaten. Daniel Collins was a Australian Open finalist. Svitolina, of course, made multiple semi-finals of slams. Swiatek and Rebecca, we know they're Grand Slam champions. So the fact that she got through that, you think, well, surely she'll just go into the final and think, actually, I'm good enough. I've beaten these players to now really go toe to toe with Sabalenka. And she clearly seemed like she had a new lease of life, but I didn't think that she would win it after the second set. I thought Sabalenka's coming back into this. She looked like she was starting to take over a bit. I mean, Keys was there. Like you could tell she hadn't dipped massively in her level, which was a positive. But I just thought in the third set, when it gets a bit tight, Sabalenka's got the experience. She's won the last two, of course. And with Keys, she hasn't been in this position in a Grand Slam final before. So how does it's sink or swim? And she swam. Well, she swam. She
Yeah.
swam even very effectively in the end. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised because I think she's. I don't know. It was great to see. It has been good to see some stability on the women's side, but
Mhm.
I think it was still. Look at this tournament and say it wasn't like the Raducanu win, for example, at the US Open, where all the top players kind of fell by the wayside quite early, and she didn't have to face a single top 10 player. Keys has got through top players, and a lot of them have gone deep. Swiatek semi-finals, Sabalenka finals, so they're still there. But it's great to then throw in a bit of a wild card into the mix of Madison Keys. So uh, I thought that was fantastic to watch and very entertaining as well. One of the best Grand Slam finals on the women's side I've seen in a while. I think
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
for sure. And the only thing that was missing, and I'm not complaining too much is that it would have been great if we got a final set tiebreaker like we did in this Swiatek match, because that match ended up being so dramatic, and obviously the match point saved, etc. But I think it was almost as good as you can get for a women's Grand Slam final, given what happened. Do you think then she's a threat for the rest of the year? I guess, Amy, now going forward, or do you think it's going to be a potential release of, oh, I've done it, I've finally done it. This is such a big moment in my career, and there may be a bit of a slump, and or do you think she might still carry on in the same vein and then actually start competing? I mean, I'm assuming, say, a tournament like Wimbledon, she looked really good last year, but she was injured against Paolini, and so ended up losing that, and she was in tears. But if she's not injured for that, she should have a decent chance to go deep there as well, I imagine.
Yeah, that could be a really interesting tournament for her. I don't know her, so I don't know how she's going to deal with this. I mean, being American, she's gonna have, like, that extra layer of celebrity, expectations, spotlight on her. Um, but she's a little bit older, so, she's probably used to it, and she's been playing tennis at this level, I think, since she was 16 years old. So, it could go either way. Um, I mentioned that last season she was saying that she was actually really digging clay and was finding her timing. This might have been like Rome, and was like, "I like the little bit extra time, for my take back on my forehand." So that may be when she goes to Roland Garros, that may be where, potentially she hits a little bit of a lull and there's that release, and it's a clay season is such a grind. But I would really love to see her compete at Wimbledon because she's definitely got the power game for it and the serve.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think at Wimbledon she clearly is quite comfortable on the grass as well. So it'll be interesting to see how she does there, and if she does have a really solid rest of the year going into the US Open. Obviously, it'll be a home slam. I wonder how she'll be received there and what the expectations will be like for her going into that. And it might take a little bit of pressure off, say, Coco as well, which is interesting because to see whether
Yes.
Coco enjoys that. And even Jess Pagula as well. Of course, she had a disappointing Australian Open, but I think. Actually, what do you think around? I mean, because do you think Pagula will look at this and say, "I've consistently been not close to winning one, but she's not been far off. I mean, it's been a couple of steps, right? Quarterfinals. I think she made a semi-final. Obviously, I think she made a semi-final last year as well. So she is in the mix, and everyone's always thought, oh, she should win maybe one in her career, and she's always been pushing. She's won Masters 1000 tournaments. She's been very consistent. The most consistent player apart from Coco. I mean, she might look at Madison and say, "Oh, like she's just come in and kind of caught fire and she's won one, but I feel like I should win one." And I mean, does it add pressure to her? Do you think because she's a similar age to say, look, I need to
I think
do
it adds
something?
pressure to all the Americans.
Really,
No.
even Coco.
Yeah, yeah, Coco, she may relish the competition, but it does add pressure. Now she's not the only, American woman with a grand slam who's currently playing. Um, Pagula, the interesting thing about Keys, and I'm just so this is why it was such a satisfying win for so many people globally. She made changes. She was stubborn, didn't wanna make, didn't wanna make, didn't wanna make, and then was kinda like, "I'm desperate. I'm going to throw the whole kitchen sink at it." And so many players are reluctant to change grips or game style or serve. So Pagula is an incredible athlete with an incredible mentality. I would love to see her come into the net more, maybe change her style a little bit, be open to some other things. And if that's something that comes out of this for all the players on tour, men and women, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I agree. It keeps them on their toes, doesn't it? I
Mhm,
think, which is a positive thing. I think for especially for the women, because it means that they, yeah, will now look, and I guess they'll look at Keys and say, like you were saying, she's changed things. It's worked for her, so they might contemplate, well, should I change something?
mhm.
And that's a positive thing. And maybe it's not right for them, but there's no harm in tinkering, and then you can always go back if needed. But you I think it's definitely worth trying out different things if you're not getting the results that you expect from yourself. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the landscape of American women's tennis looks like at the end of the year, and who the winners and potential losers are, I guess, from 2025. But before I ask about some other players, you talked about Collins. Obviously, had a really good tournament. What was your take on the interaction between her and the crowd? who was who was in the right? Were they both wrong? Like, what did you make of it all?
I thought Danielle was in the right. Hashtag team Danielle. Why? I do know what these players put up with, or I can see, I've observed what they put up with. They put up with a lot of abuse, both from fans in person who maybe have been drinking and online, the gamblers that are upset that they lost. So she's just the type of personality that um she's not going to take it. She's gonna stand up for herself. And there was nothing, there weren't any obscene gestures or anything like that. It was sassy, but she stood up to them, and I like the attitude. Plus, as a journalist, she's a colorful personality. She's a character. She's not robotic. And that is like a dream come true for a journalist, because you want people that are interesting and bring a level of entertainment to the sport that you're covering.
No, that's fair enough. Yeah, I think that the abuse that some of the players get is, yeah, it's horrific, and it's, yeah, definitely no room for it in the sport, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm I kind of lean two ways. I think she was well within her right to say something back, and she should have, and she should stand up for herself. I think it's, I don't know, something the way it's, I think it's maybe the way that she does it, like the way she goes about some of some of the things she says. I don't know. I just, maybe it's because also I'm not American as well, so maybe it just sits a bit weirdly with me being a Brit. Like we kind of, like, for example, Draper, right? He was getting a lot of chat from the crowd, and he played Vukic and Kokonakis, but he was very much like polite and reserved. And I felt like he also thought I can maybe use the crowd later. And obviously Collins doesn't care, and she was like, "I'm not going to take it," which is understandable. But then I do wonder whether it also had a potential effect on. I mean, I know she's carrying an injury against Keys, and Keys played really well, but when she walked out, they booed her like relentlessly when she walked out when they announced her name. And I could be wrong, but it looked like it maybe got to her a little bit in that moment, and that was like, okay, that's quite a big deal, because she doesn't seem like the type of person you'll get to in that
I don't
moment.
think it got, I mean, first of all, I believe the set score was 6-4, 6-4. So it was
Yeah,
two close sets. I think Keys was just playing amazing tennis, and that was borne out by the fact that she won the tournament. So Danielle can't feel too bad about her tennis, at least. Um, just like, okay, I get it. And I've mixed it up with Europeans when I've been in Europe, and they look at me as like the crazy American or whatever. I get that. Cultural differences, I guess you would say. But I think the perfect apples to apples comparison is Medvedev, say at the US Open. He's willing to mix it up with the crowd, and they really liked it, and he would give it right back to them, and he has done some obscene gestures, by the way. It's actually not apples to apples, because he's taken it a step farther. And are we sitting here on podcasts saying Medvedev shouldn't have done that? He needs to be more demure. He needs to be more, you know, straight. Play it straight, Mehdi. No, nobody says that. They just want
Yeah.
him to be him. So
Yeah, that's fair.
let's hold Danielle to the same standard.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I think that's a fair comparison. I think for sure. On the women's side, then, I mean, who surprised you in terms of runs? Who are you pleasantly surprised by?
I was really pleasantly surprised by Svitolina just because, similarly to Keys, I think that she's playing very free right now. And 5, 10 years ago, when I would watch Svitolina play, I thought that her game style was much more counterpunch. Now she's moved more to aggressive baseliner, and by the way, she plays well in the front court as well. Don't give her a short ball. But I'm just very pleasantly surprised and happy at the level of tennis that she's been bringing to the table.
Yeah, she's been very good since coming back from from her break. She's been. I mean, she's arguably played she's played some of the best tennis of her career, actually. So, also changed rackets as well. I think she's changed to Diadem from Wilson, which was an interesting change, but doesn't seem to have slowed her down. She played some really good tennis in this tournament as well. And yeah, I mean, for me, actually, it was the lucky loser, Eva Elise, making the fourth round.
Oh,
And she
nice.
lost
Yeah,
to
good
Iga
call.
Swiatek. Yeah, so I'm getting the call 5 minutes before the match that Kalinske had pulled out, and she's just hanging around the courts. And luckily, so essentially just got changed and then went on to court straight away after she was having a hit. And so she said she had a loose arm and ended up, getting through the first three matches. And obviously, eventually got dismantled by Shrionte, but there's no shame in that. She's doing it to most players. Raducanu also got the same treatment, to be fair, as well. But yeah, I mean, it was great because I actually spoke to her at Wimbledon during qualifying, and she ended up beating Anisimova last year and qualifying to make the main draw, but it was third time lucky. So she'd the year before made the second round, lost. Then the year before that made the first round of qualifying, and she lost the first round of qualifying as well. So she was saying third time lucky, and she was obviously building it up. But in this tournament, she got a slice of luck and really took the opportunity and capitalized. So I thought that was great to see. And obviously, we had the Australian story of Destiny Ava as well, who seems like a real character as well.
Mhm.
Check out her Twitter account if you guys haven't actually on X. I think she's quite funny as well, very relatable. So that I thought that was a really good run as well. And I think the other one, which is I guess in the same ilk as Svitolina, but she's very early off her break, is Bencic, who obviously ended up making the fourth round as well. Lost to Coco in three sets, but I know she didn't beat Osaka outright because she took a set off her, but Osaka was, clearly a little bit hampered as well, given she retired. But I was really impressed that she came back in her first Grand Slam and made that run the way she did because I don't know. After just recently having a child, I feel like it's
Yeah.
incredible that these women come back and play at this level and then able to just I don't know, like so quickly as well. It's crazy to me. So I have to say I'm really just I'm really impressed every time I see it. So that was great to see. Um, in terms of players that maybe didn't quite meet your expectations, were there any players that you were a little bit disappointed by?
Um, on the women's side,
Yeah,
I guess I was a little disappointed in Osaka, especially after her first round match. But I understand she's injured and all that. I
yeah,
just I feel that she's really upped her fitness within the last 6 months.
yeah.
She looks as fit as a fiddle, and I'm really, Indian Wells is a tournament that she's won before. So I hope that she's healed and that she's able to go back and play that and do well in it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, her run was so difficult because she played Garcia, who she lost to in the first round last year, beat her. Then Mukova, who she lost to at the US Open in the first or second round. I think second round. last year as well. Beat both of them. I mean, the first few rounds are really tougher, so she did well to get through it. And yeah, I mean, it would have been great to see a potential Osaka Golf match if they're both fit, because we haven't seen that in a slam anyway for a while. So that would have been great to see. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that she stays fit and she can really give it a good go this year, because I mean, there's nothing like hearing the sound of a tennis ball off her racket. I feel like it's a very unique experience, and so she's a entertaining player to watch. I was a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I was disappointed, but I think maybe disappointed, but not surprised, was Maria Sakkari losing to Osorio in the first round. And Sakkari's obviously fought, or been fighting her own Grand Slam demons for quite a while, really struggling to get through first and second rounds for a couple of years now. Was injured last year, has come back, and looks, as you were saying, like for Osaka. I mean, she's fit as a fiddle. I mean, she's arguably the fittest player on tour, Sakkari, and new coaching team doesn't seem to have made a huge difference. It was a tight 3-set match, but I actually, when I did my bracket, I picked it to lose, and begrudgingly picked it to lose, and unfortunately it was the case. But I don't know what she needs to do. What are your thoughts on her and Grand Slams and her game? I mean, what does she need to do to get back potentially to competing, I guess, and looking to actually make runs at slams?
I think she needs to shore up the forehand. It's a weapon, but it also is prone to errors. So I would look very hard at that. They say there's 4 aspects to tennis: physical, mental, technical, tactical. She's got the physical down, right? She loves the gym. She posts all her videos, and some of her physical feats in the gym are just like incredible, goals. Uh, but I've always thought that, like, you can't excel so much in one aspect and expect that to take you to the promised land. That's what's so great about tennis. You really have to concurrently work on all 4 aspects. So, I would look at the other 3 aspects, and technically, I would look at the forehand, because just based on the data alone, she makes a lot of errors off that wing, even though it's a weapon.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's definitely fair, and I think the mental side, it's really interesting. It's one of the 4 aspects, and I think the mental side is definitely one that she should look into as well, because I feel like there's also been a bit of a mental block at slams, and she's always. I think the last time she made the second week of a slam was US Open 2022, I want to say, which is a while ago now. So
Mm.
she's not been injured for many of the slams either. So she's just struggling mentally, and there are obviously some of those years she won a Masters 1000 tournament, or she's winning some tournaments. So it's not like her level wasn't there throughout the year, but it just dips during slams, and I think she puts a lot of pressure on herself. Maybe she needs to look at Madison Keys and try and take a leaf out of her book in terms of mentality, potentially, on how to adjust that, because she's also not particularly young now. She's getting to the stage of her career where she should be really in her prime, and now competing and playing some of her best tennis, but that hasn't quite been the case. Is there anything else you want to touch upon on the women's side before we switch to the men's?
Um, just that, I too was impressed with Swiatek. Best result in Australia, I think, and
Yeah, I think joint, because she lost to Collins, didn't she, in 2021?
okay, matched her best result.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so she's got a lot swirling around her right now with the, positive drug test, which she, explained and they identified, but there's still a lot of animosity around that. So, she handled the pressure well to make a deep run on a surface that is a challenge for her, because she obviously does. You talked about the RPM. She obviously does brilliantly on clay, and she has won the US Open, which at that time was a slower hard court. So this is a little bit faster hard court, medium fast hard court. Maybe not her absolute favorite surface, but she's a great champion and she acquitted herself well. That's my final thought.
Yeah, I agree. And I wonder also whether there's been some influence by Wim Fissette, her new coach as well, who clearly has had a lot of success with previous champions. So good to see her adapting, and that's what true champions do, right? So she is still very young as well,
Mhm.
and she is always willing to learn by the looks of it and always adapting, and that's what the great players do, and that's why they win multiple slams. So interesting to see how she goes the rest of the year. And obviously she'll be the favorite at Roland Garros, as she always is, but there'll be a lot of women at her heels, I'm sure, who want to compete for that as well. So I'm interested to see how that one goes. For the men's then, so Yannick Sinner defended his title. I actually predicted a Sinner Zverev final, so I'm pretty happy with that.
So did
But
I.
did you? Oh, nice,
Yes, in fact, I
fantastic.
got I got 3 of the 4, final 4, yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah.
Oh
I
wow.
had
Yeah.
Fritz, not Shelton,
Oh wow. Okay. No,
but
I had.
I did have Djokovic over Alcaraz.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah, I had Zverev Alcaraz to be fair, so I didn't. I was umming and ahhing that one, and then I thought, surely, I don't know, maybe time's catching up, but I mean, no, I played really well in that quarter final. Um, no, that's amazing. Actually, that's great picks. Yeah, Shelton did really well to at the semis, I thought as well. Great run from him. But Sinner, I mean, he did get a favourable draw. I think it's fair to say, but I don't know if it would have made much difference. He was clinical, I think, throughout the whole tournament. I think he only dropped 2 sets to School K and Holger Rune. School K was a little bit of a surprise factor. That was a fun couple of sets that he played against Sinner and with the Aussie crowd as well. And that was great to see. But Holger Rune pushed him. He had his chances, but not sure whether even if he'd taken 2 sets, would he have beaten him? Not sure. So Yannick didn't really ever look like he was in a lot of trouble at any point. So kind of went through it, and I mean, I wouldn't say machine-like, but I want to say machine-like in a positive way because he's just, we were talking about the grounding, but he's just extremely consistent now in his game, and he's improved so many different aspects of serve. He's now got the forehand drop shot. He's better at the net. Still don't think it's extremely natural, but it's serviceable. He's got good enough feet and movement at the net that he can, if he has to hit an extra volley, he can. He tends to win the point from there as well. So I think he's becoming a hardcore machine anyway, that's for sure, I think. And definitely the best player on hard courts by far. He's won the last 3 hardcore majors. For Zverev, obviously pushed him a little in the first 2 sets. There wasn't much in it, but there were 2 moments which kind of, I think, went Sinner's way. One was obviously the net cord, and he played that tiebreaker better, Sinner. But in the first set, there was, I don't actually know whatever came from this, but it was I like to call it the racket gate, where Zverev asked the umpire about his 2 rackets that he'd given to the stringers like an hour before the match, and he was like, well, I need them because there was new balls at 4-3, and essentially he didn't get them at that point. And then I knew exactly what was going to happen when he was arguing with the umpire, and I was like, he's going to get broken. And exactly that happened. He got broken in that game, and then he lost the set 6-3. So, and he clearly looked a bit bemused after. But what were your thoughts on the final? Were you surprised at the straight sets? And, were you surprised at Sinner won? I'm assuming not, given you picked the final. I'm assuming you picked Sinner as a champion.
Yes, I did. Uh, no, I wasn't surprised straight sets. Yeah, there were some unlucky moments for Zverev, but I will say that to his credit, in the post-match, he says he's the better player right now. All credit to Zverev for acknowledging that so bluntly. Um, I thought that, I mean, a few things like, yeah, the rackets and the net cord actually was a very pivotal point because Zverev had gone up the mini break in that tiebreaker. And then Sinner was able to pull even and went on a run of a few different points. And that particular forehand by Sinner was a little bit risky. So let's say that that doesn't go Sinner's way and it goes Zverev's way. And let's say then Zverev is able to win that set. I Sinner, despite the fact that he was very clinical, um, seemed to be not feeling his best at points during the tournament. And if that match had extended to 4 or 5 sets, we might have had a better match there. I still think Sinner would have won, but, maybe not so decisive.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Zverev was very humble in the post-match interview, as you said, and clearly said, he was a better player. And I was a little bit not well, I was a little bit alarmed. I think it's because he was so dejected after losing the way he did in straight sets. But he essentially said that he wasn't good enough at the moment, or isn't good enough at the moment, and his team's doing everything that they can. And I think he also said, he doesn't know if he'll ever win one of these, but he'll come back and try his best. And that's the first time I've ever heard him talk as if he might not win one. I wanted to ask actually on the nature of the loss. Do you think so? Do you think it's well? He's come back after the really bad injury from Roland Garros 2022. He made the final last year of Roland Garros in 2024, then made the final here. But the difference between this final to the other two is that obviously he was in a winning position in both of them. So US Open 2020, he was 2 sets to love up, heartbreaking loss in the end, but it was close fifth set even. And then Roland Garros last year, 2 sets to 1 up, and the last 2 sets, I think Carlos was very dominant. But again, he was still in a winning position. Here, he didn't really have at any moment a chance where he was in that position, and given he didn't win a single set, do you think he's right to feel a little bit dejected? And what were your thoughts around that? Do you think it's a good sign, bad sign, or neither?
He's in a tough spot because he's the number 2 player in the world and he's never won a Grand Slam. He had a really good run, played some brilliant tennis actually, but didn't come close in the final. So does he make wholesale changes? Does he make small changes? Does he make small tweaks? And actually, having Djokovic retire against him after one set, kind of maybe undermined his confidence. So, there's things going on with him. He's type 1 diabetic. He had to inject himself with insulin twice during the match with Sinner. This is hard. This is really, really difficult what he's trying to do and what he is doing, being a world-class athlete and dealing with this, constantly having to monitor his blood sugar. Um, on balance, with all that in mind, if I were him, I would definitely keep doing what he's doing with the serve and look to shore up the forehand and maybe look at some stuff with return position. But other than that, and maybe, every single player on tour pretty much can work on their volley. But other than that, you know, just take a page from Madison Keys and realize that even if you don't win a Grand Slam, you're still a hell of a player. And maybe let some of that go and see what happens. Maybe then it will happen.
Yeah. I feel like maybe it's harder for him because it's being put to him, and he was saying he doesn't want to be the best player to never win a slam. I feel with Madison Keys she wouldn't be that because she hasn't won an Olympic gold and multiple Masters 1000 tournaments, and I think we know that Zverev is at that stage in his career where the only thing really missing is a slam, and it's always been a question of when. And I mean, to be fair, Madison Keys was like a prodigy growing up as well when she was younger. But for Zverev, I think he's a prodigy, and he has consistently had results. He hasn't maybe lit fire like he thought he would. But or we thought he would as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one because if he takes off the expectation, does he play better? Potentially. I also do think, and it might be to do with the expectation and pressure he puts on himself, that in the big moments in that Sinner match in the final, and it has been the case in quite a few Grand Slam matches in big moments, he has faltered either because he's played too passively, or just because, like, and you're talking about shoring up the forehand is so true because in some of the instances he actually did try to play proactively and tried to play aggressively with the forehand, and he ended up making errors either into the net or long or wide because he just isn't used to playing that way on a consistent basis. I think he did play that way throughout the majority of the Australian Open, but I don't think he's played that way for a whole year, for example. I feel like it happens in spurts during certain tournaments, but there are still tournaments where he reverts back to type, and we see that really like loopy, forehand cross court that we've been accustomed to seeing in certain matches where he almost just tries to outlast the opponent rather than playing on the front foot. And we saw that at times against Sin. And I think in one of the tiebreak points, I remember there was a mid-court ball and he hit a forehand slice, which is just so random. And then he missed, and then he hit a forehand, tried to go cross court with the forehand. He shanked it after because clearly the mindset just wasn't there to be aggressive. And then he tried to snap himself into it, and then it just wasn't. It didn't happen. So I think it's something that needs to be consistent. I don't think he can just turn it on and off. But I agree with the serve. And someone actually mentioned to me that maybe he should add Guarani Venicevic to his team, who obviously was just working with Rabaki, didn't have him because he does struggle. Well, he did struggle with the volleys, especially in the final, I thought. And coming forward with the serve he's got, I mean, Goran was the master of serve volley and coming forward and transitioning. So I think that was actually a pretty good suggestion. I just
Yeah,
don't know
that's a
whether he'll.
great
Yeah.
call. How do we make that happen?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, actually, I'm trying to think if he's ever had. He must have had other coaches other than his dad, right? I can't remember the top of my head, but whether he has.
I know that at one point there were talks with Boris Becker to be a super coach.
Okay.
I know that McEnroe is in touch with the family, John McEnroe, and has advised them at some point. I know that Federer has advised him at some point. So um, again, he's an excellent player with a lot of accomplishments, and he's the number 2 player in the world. These are all good things.
Yeah. No, I agreed. Get a Federer on board. That's what he needs to do, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, good luck
do
with
a
that.
do a Djokovic Andy
Yeah.
partnership. Yeah. Well, what do you think? Actually, what did you think of Djokovic's level at this tournament? I mean, I thought it was very positive, and obviously the winner of Alcaraz as well. And a shame that he had to retire because of the hamstring tear versus Zverev. And what have you made of the coaching situation as well, relation between himself and Andy?
I thought that Novak had a really good tournament. It's unfortunate that he had the tear. It doesn't surprise me that he was able to finish that match and beat Alcaraz because he's Novak. He's done this so many times with a torn muscle in his abdomen, other many other injuries that has a very high pain threshold, and he's very dogged in competition. In terms of the relationship with Murray, I read Murray's comments and I thought that it was really interesting that he said that there's more to coaching that I have to learn. And I think that's an amazing approach, like always learning. And he's right. If you really drill down to what he was saying like there's playing and then there's educating. And being an educator, you actually have to study for that. So that's, what he's in the process of right now. I'm sure he can get some advice from his mom because she's one of the great educators.
Yeah, agreed. And he loves a stat as well, Andy Murray. So I feel like he's probably relishing this. He's loving this. And it's funny. I think I don't know if it was Novak or someone else said that they were surprised that his wife let him do it straight after retirement because he obviously got itchy straight away, like after
Well,
being on tour.
maybe she actually liked the setup that they had, you know, and,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
you're
exactly.
around all the time, every day now.
Yeah,
Oh, go do your
yeah.
thing for a while." I don't know. I don't know.
It could be. I wouldn't be
Spoken like
surprised.
a person who's been married, like, forever, so I
Yeah.
get it, I get it.
Yeah, no, same. I'm sure my wife would say the same thing to me. Get out of the house. Don't want you around all the time,
Yeah,
hovering
yeah,
over me. What are you doing? What
yeah,
are you doing? Exactly.
yeah, right.
No, for sure. No, I mean it's a great partnership. It just seems like yeah, they're really getting on. Do you think they'll carry on past the Australian Open because it hasn't been decided yet by the sounds of
Yeah, I do. I don't know what Andy's, schedule is gonna be like or the desire that he has to travel the world, but I don't think we've seen the last of him. That's purely a guess. I have no insider knowledge.
it? You don't have Judy Murray on speed dial, Amy.
No,
Uh,
unfortunately, no. I wish I did.
well, to be fair, obviously not good for Novak and Andy, but I guess good for his schedule. He probably doesn't need to be around for the next couple of months as Novak's out with the hamstring tear, which is a big shame. So he'll miss a couple of tournaments that he was scheduled to play: Doha, Indian Wells, Miami, I think, as well. So hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later and back to full fitness. What were your thoughts on Alcaraz then in that quarterfinal? And he looked like he was playing a really good level up until that point. A bit of naivety maybe in that quarterfinal against Novak. I mean, he looked to go into his shell a little bit, try and limit errors, play a bit passively. And he said after that he did exactly that, and he should have maybe just put his foot on the gas and he should have been clinical. Maybe it was him being too much of a nice guy, Amy. So, what are the learnings for Alcaraz from that?
It is extremely difficult to play somebody who is injured. I can't emphasize that enough because you just don't know what you're supposed to do. You just don't know how to play this person. And Novak really started going for his shots there. It's hard to play somebody against somebody who's just like crushing everything. And then, after the pain meds kicked in, he was more like just normal Novak, and Carlos got frustrated. And I think naive, you said it, is the perfect word for it because, I mean, have you not watched any of like Djokovic Murray, Australian Open 2015? Novak appeared to be injured, and was injured. And then Murray, it got in his head and he didn't play well. He ended up losing the match. Um, there have been dozens of instances, and even Novak himself acknowledged, like, I've been there too. Again, I've been in your scenario, and it is extremely difficult. But naive is a good word, and he'll just put this in his tool shed and learn from it, I'm sure.
Yeah, a learning experience for him. He's so young still, right? So definitely, I think Djokovic, I like to say old man to him a little bit, but he essentially said as well in the post match press conference, which is in his he's well entitled to, but there was a little bit of gamesmanship, I think, as well. He knew that okay, Carlos was not really latching on like to the fact that he was injured or the payments kicked in, and he took advantage of it. He said, and why wouldn't he? But he's just such a master, I think, of obviously on the core and tactically, but also when it comes to the mental as well. And he just knows how to approach everything. And I think that's something that obviously Carlos can work on. And he's still so young, so I'm sure he will. And he's so advanced as it is in majority of the aspects. Well, yeah, of the tennis aspects at the moment, anyways. In terms of a player that surprised you in a positive way, Amy? Who was that?
I think Ben Shelton surprised me. Again, I had Fritz coming through that quarter. Um, Pleasantly surprised, and he's learning, and he is learning how to harness, I think, his power and learning when to pull it in a little bit, pull in your targets, and being a lefty, learning to work with his advantages on that front. Of course, the big lefty serve and mix up his service spots and spins, speeds, locations, the whole thing. It's really coming together for this guy. He's a very intelligent player.
Yeah, he is, and he's a great athlete as well. I think I was watching him play against Sinner, and I just thought, he's got so much to him about his game. Was the big serve, and he mentioned that he hasn't maybe served as well as he could have at the Australian Open. He's clearly learning. He's got the raw ingredients, but just needs to hone that in. And the forehand's a little bit unorthodox, even though he's changed the grip and the technique a little bit. But it's still very. I find it very unorthodox, but it clearly works for him. It's quite a powerful weapon, and he's got great, very natural at the net. I think he's got great hands, good transition game. The backhand's flat, and he's obviously still learning from the baseline to add a bit of consistency to his game. But I think he's learning and really hungry to be out there and court. Clearly enjoys it as well, and that's one of the biggest things I think is that he's happy on court, and that always makes a player dangerous. So I'm interested to see how he now does the rest of the year. He should do well at Wimbledon and US Open. I mean, on clay, I'm not sure how he'll get on, but I imagine he'll give it a good go. In terms of a player that maybe didn't quite meet expectations for you, who would that be?
Tsitsipas, he's really at a low point right now and has got to figure some stuff out with his game. But he's a very talented player, and I think he will bring it together. You can do great things with a one-handed backhand. You just have to learn, what you're going to do on that wing as opposed to thinking of it as a stroke. I think he should say, how am I going to approach this wing? Am I going to slice more? Because that's what a lot of guys are doing. That's what Dimitrov is doing. Federer used to do it. You might see Pericard doing that more. Um, am I going to run around it and hit forehand? Well, there's a dark side to that too. So he's probably my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, we're really hammering the Greeks. So we promise we love Greece. Zachary
Yeah.
and Tsitsipas
Yes.
is because we want them to do well. And yeah, I mean, look, he's such a talented player, and it's a shame because if you look at Zverev before this, he'd made 2 Slam finals, and Tsitsipas made 2 Slam finals before the Australian Open, and going into this, then you look at the tournament as a whole, and it's such a big contrast, right? Tsitsipas losing in the first round, but Kelson is a very talented player, made the fourth round in the end, but you'd still think that Tsitsipas, a player of his caliber and quality, should be able to navigate his way through it. Whereas Zverev obviously made the final, so it's just interesting that for Tsitsipas, it's not really clicking right now, and his partner Badosa is doing great. So I don't think there can really be the excuse that people say that's a distraction, but she's doing fantastically well. First ever Grand Slam semi-final. We didn't talk about her earlier, but she did really obviously played some fantastic tennis. This tournament beat Coco, which I predicted, so I was really happy about that before the tournament. A lot of people were calling me crazy for it, but managed to get lucky with that one. So yeah, it's only going to get harder as well for these guys because the next gen are here. And on the men's side, especially, we saw Tien beat Medvedev. Obviously, that was my pick.
Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite match of the tournament. We had obviously Mikkelsen beat Tsitsipas, and we had who else? Fonseca beat Rublev. Right, so these guys they'd all play the next gen finals in 2024. You throw into the mix Feast and Shang were also in that next gen. These guys are coming through. They're already winning tournaments. Mensik as well. Yeah, I just feel like it's only going to get harder for them. So I feel like they were at a stage of their career where they thought, oh, it's only a matter of time. Don't worry, Novak and Rafa and Roger, they'll retire, they get old, and then the opportunity will come. And they forgot that actually there's going to be guys coming, but like who are younger than them who are coming through. They the assumption was they could just boss them, but Sinner and Alcaraz broke the mold, and now these guys are coming through as well, and they're starting to cause problems. So yeah, not sure. I mean, if you were to guess, do you think Tsitsipas will win a slam in his career?
Um, yes. I think maybe he'll win Roland Garros.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It would be a
But
shame if
yeah,
he
I
does.
mean, you're totally right. Like, you've got this Joao Fonseca, um, Mensick, and guess what? It's not stopping here. There's going to be guys coming in after them, like every
Yeah, just
year.
wait. Well, yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, there's also the junior who won the Australian Open juniors, who's sponsored by On, and he's got his idols. There, Roger. He's come through the same like through Basel, and he's got one-handed backhand as well. So he's coming through, and people are talking a lot about him, like they were talking about Fonseca. So I'm interested. I'm assuming he's going to go pro soon, whether it's this year or the next year. And yeah, I was thinking he's coming through as well. And these guys, they're just constantly they're churning them out. So and they don't have a scar tissue, right? Of this
right.
now gen. That's the thing. That's the difference. So they're playing fearless tennis, and they're coming out and you know they're playing in a really positive, free way. And we know what a difference that can make. We were talking about Madison Keys earlier. It just makes such a big difference. Your mentality, if you can play that way. Is there anything on the men's side you want to talk about, Amy, before we wrap it up?
Um, just that I do think that I've been saying this for years, and I will continue to say it, and now other people are really picking up on it. We are seeing an increase in net play. We're I think officially departing that baseline only era that we were in. And the really elite players now are all court players mostly.
Yeah,
Um, or if they don't have those skills, they're willing to acquire them.
yeah, and that's great. I love it. I love it. I was so happy to see when Alcaraz first broke through the fact that he was willing to come to the net. Runa, I mean, Sinner not so much, but now he is also doing it. Medvedev obviously, he's the archetypal baseliner, but we've even seen him venture to the net awkwardly as it may be, but effective in its own way at times. To be fair, Tsitsipas always used to come to the net. He's very natural the net, but yeah, it's been great to see more players venturing forward. Shelton as well, and have that variety in their game and playing different ways rather than just seeing the classic grinding from the baseline, exchanges, and that's fine. Sometimes we love that, but it's good to have variety and have people playing different ways. And uh, you know, I'm all for it, to be honest. And I think it only makes the level of tennis higher if people can play and utilize different ways of playing. Actually, before we wrap up, I had one quick question, if that's okay, on the coaching pods. What do you think of them?
Um, I don't like them. I want those coaches back where they were before. Um, the one of the reasons that I don't like them is that I think the coaches can see what's going on better, not at eye level. Because I have sat
Mm,
in both places, sort of. I mean, I've never been a coach, but I've sat down in the photographer's well, and I've sat sort of around a box. I remember I sat right behind Boris Becker when he was coaching Novak. You can see it better from up there.
yeah. Okay.
And I don't know, there's something unnatural about it. Maybe I'm old school. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think part of me thinks, oh, it's a good move. I mean, if they're going to have on-court coaching, I feel like then why does it matter if it's in a pod, right? It makes no difference. Now it just means more regulars in between points. But I mean, I was of the opinion we should just not have on-court coaching, let them figure out themselves. But then they introduced it, so now it's here, so fine. They just, I guess, added a layer to it. They're trying to make it more exciting and add some entertainment, I'm assuming, with that aspect, and also introduce live data. So now you can obviously introduce live data to the players, so they're making it more technical in that standpoint, more statistical. I mean, I don't mind where they sit. I guess the only thing I'd say is that now that they know there's on-court coaching and they can talk like between points, between games all the time. Some place I saw, for example, Badosa talking to her box after like a changeover, and her box weren't sitting in the pod; they were sitting in the usual area. And I think Tsitsipas was telling her to, calm down, calm down. And she was like, "Here's my racket. Do you want to use it?" But she was getting like struggling to like communicate with them. And I was just thinking, wouldn't it have just been better if they were just in the pod and then she could have just gone up to him, and it would have been funnier, right? If she'd actually gone and tried to give him the racket, and that would have been a good moment, right?
Good
Uh,
point.
yeah, and those types of things. Then actually, she was obviously trying to speak to them, and it's like, why not just have them in the pod? Then you can speak to them. So I feel like now that they've said you can do it, then fine, you can be in the pod. But I, like you was just saying about the view, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe they could have one person in the team who's still sitting up there, or two, and then they split, for example, so they have different perspectives, and then maybe, I don't know, they could change it up during the match or whatever to give them the kind of full picture. But yeah, I mean, I guess I was very fixated on what Murray was doing in the pod, and he was just extremely stoic throughout the whole tournament, which is quite funny. And I think when Novak beat Alcaraz and then went up to Murray and like screamed like, "Yeah, like really happy," gave him a massive hug, and Murray just didn't change at all in his demeanor. It's just so funny. It's classic Murray, just absolutely classic. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely some value to it, but yeah, I'd still be for the no on-court coaching. Yeah, like choice. I think it. I don't know. I feel like if they're going to have on-court coaching, then and they are slowly starting to do it, then they may as well let the crowds just talk, and there may as well
Hmm.
be an atmosphere, because then at least it levels out a little bit. Because otherwise, you just make it not too easy, but it's almost like becomes, I don't know, there's a little bit of hand holding going on, right? If it's happening
Hmm.
every single point, I feel like the players can't develop at the same rate if they're not able to figure out themselves and adjust, right? And sometimes the coaching team might tell them something, but actually they're the ones in the moment at that time. Sometimes they actually know best in that moment.
Hmm.
So sometimes they need to take it into their own hands and adjust. So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how people utilize it. I guess the tool is there. It's how people utilize it in the best possible way and optimize it depending on the person. But yeah.
Hmm.
Anyways, thanks, Amy. I really appreciate your time. I know over a little bit as well, but I appreciate you being on as always. If you haven't already, do check out Amy on X, and also she writes some really good pieces for Tennis Connected, and also does some work for some other outlets as well. Hopefully, I think you're saying you potentially might be at Delray Beach, so enjoy that. If you are there, and maybe you might run into each other, or at least someone from the team at Indian Wells or Miami as well, it'd be great to catch up as well.
That would be amazing. Always enjoy talking with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Have a good day.
You too.